joining us here at I'm Real News. And as you know, we've been the only outlet reporting on the exposure of B.E.D.S, the Black Excellence Deep State. And you just recently had an interview with Vlad TV where you referenced our coverage of B.E.D.S. But you didn't give your name and you didn't come here first. Why didn't you come here first? Well, I was told you don't pay and you don't welcome snitches. So then why come here now? And again, tell us your name. My name is A.M. Bourgeois. A.M. Bourgeois. I am A.M. Bourgeois. And I went to Vlad because the bag over there was enormous. So now I feel like I can do more for the people, you know, give back to the community. Plus, I stay busy. I'm not, short of work. As soon as Spike Lee fired me for watching a Tyler Perry movie during my lunch break, I got a call from Bed Sheets. Security handles everything, enabling tactical security. They needed to beef up the team working with B.E.D.S members Oprah and Gayle King. Bed Sheets? Yeah, Bed Sheets. Security handles everything, enabling tactical security. That's who manages those of us working security for B.E.D.S. And we are so secure that the word is in the name twice, like CISA. You know CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Building our cognitive infrastructure.
So you were there to work security at the recent space launch that's getting a lot of attention in the news this past week. What was that all about?
Yeah, that shit had nothing to do with whatever they were saying it was. Most involved, even the women in the flight, didn't know what was up. Oprah, who you know can cry on demand, put on a good show. She helped lay down the narrative, you know, talking about expressions and Gayle being as a pioneer and this is good for women and all that. That's not what that stuff was. B.E.D.S sent Gayle up there to adjust the satellites.
B.E.D.S has satellites?
Yeah, man. They were launched shortly after the 1996 Source Awards. You know, Diddy and Bad Boy versus Suge and Death Row had nothing to do with Eastern versus West Coast and all that. That's not what that was about. It was about who would lead the death of hip-hop. Hip-hop had to be destroyed to give more room for B.E.D.S to seem legit. It's that simple. And it was working perfectly until you all exposed that B.E.D signal chat. That's when they started scrambling to fix the surveillance and security networks. Look, you could play those clips that I brought. You have to know the code to understand what's happening for real.
All right, let's play those clips.
Never been more proud because this is bigger than just going to space.
She's admitting that it's bigger than space. She just can't say why. I'm telling you that it's about those B.E.D satellites.
This is overcoming a wall of fear, a barrier. I think it's going to be cathartic in so many ways.
But I thought she was talking about Gayle's fears of flying.
Nah, of course you did. The barrier to overcome is the radical tendencies among Black people that threatens the status of B.E.D s.
Because I think life is about continuing to grow into the best of yourself and the fullest expression of yourself. And I think that this is one of the most fullest expressions you can possibly have.
All right, what's in that clip?
See again, expression. You hear it? She kept saying expression. That is expression of the Black radical tradition. Shun, run away from, expressly. All the politics that will upset B.E.D s.
I feel so calm. I don't think I've ever been more calm because I think it's already done.
Boom. The fight is over. Mission accomplished. B.E.D s is safe. See? She's wearing yellow, the symbol of communication, activity, engagement. She said it's Gayle's favorite color, please. It's a B.E.D signal that all is well. Be engaged. Communicate the B.E.D s credo. Scattered success breeds universal hope.
Scattered success breeds universal hope.
And live from these tree-lined streets, it's Saturday night.
I mix what I like, what I like.
Mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. Live healthy.
I mix what I like, what I
We're
like.
here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy liked and other cool things.
What's up, world? Welcome to I Mix What I Like live right here at I Mix What I Like. I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Welcome, everybody. And as you come on in, please do like, share, subscribe. Put this in your socials. Invite others to come on and join the fun this Saturday dusk evening. Yeah, have a little bit of fun, get into a couple things this evening. And later on, I'm going to put, as requested, I will invite folks to join us, and we can chop it up a little bit. Admittedly, not too much. I might have to keep it a little bit to an 8 o'clock stop, only because baby girl's coming back home for the weekend, or for the semi weekend, and I want to see all my children's. So, but anyway, welcome everybody. Good to see the folks in the chat. Hope you got a little bit of a kick out of that, And yeah, Chitty Matcha. So that was an all-female crew sent up by the Resource Extraction Network, built by men. Nice deflection. Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing was wild. Welcome, Maggie, DC, Joe Black, James. So, anyway. All right, got a couple things to get to, and then I will jump back in the chat and check and see what's what, and invite others to again join the show. But I do have a couple of things. A couple of things. So what I think I'm going to do for I still have some white versions of this shirt. So for patrons and channel members, we're going to work out a little plan for those. So I have so stay tuned for that. I'm gonna actually, I didn't have that as set up as I thought, but just stay tuned for that. I wanted to have the exact sizes that I had left so I can just send them out. But what I think I'm gonna do is just let's see if I can set this up right quick. What I think I'm gonna do is just invite those. Well, we'll just deal with that separately. My fault. We'll just come back to that. But thank you to the patrons and channel members. Appreciate you, and see if we can send out a nice little consolation. Since I do have some of these extra shirts, but okay. So a number of things to get to this evening of more importance. So let's see. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with a little bit side reference to Columbia University, talk a little bit about DuBois and socialism and co-ops. We're going to, I'm going to answer this Boondocks email question. We're going to look at AlexKarp of Palantir, FawnWeaver, UncleNearest, Buying Power in Africa / Wallo's rant. And then the Diddy article, part 1 of the series by Webb is her last name. What was her first name again? Whitney, yeah. I thought there was an alliteration there. By WhitneyWebb.
which is very interesting. Very interesting. A quick look at something from RizzaIslam. Then, if we have time, did want to revisit Bernie getting chanted out at over his whatever, and his Zionism, and then I got to look at this new book, Black Power Scorecard, that I want to talk a little bit about, and then we can. So nothing too heavy, and the heaviest thing might be this where we start right here, because I was really in the recent, I believe it's the most recent issue or upload from Chronicle of Higher Education. There is this story here about Columbia University. Saeed's Specter, Columbia is at war with its intellectual heritage. And I thought this was a really interesting story amidst, obviously, the threats, the withholding of federal funding, 400 million, the other threats associated with the university, the turnover of the administration, and so on. There's this piece here, and as the author Timothy Brennan writes, and the link is to this, and I think everything else is already in the show description. I think you might need some sort of a subscription or something to get one of the few benefits left of being faculty at Morgan State is the access to the Chronicle of Higher Education. Although I note that our research port access seems to be slowly dwindling, but nevertheless, we have access to this here. And as Timothy starts off here, the university's widely decried capitulation to the Trump administration's extortionist demands highlights. By the way, I'm sorry, this is what I forgot to mention. My bad. This is an extension from what we discussed earlier today with on Saturdays with Renee. Shout out to Renee, and please do check that out on Black Liberation Media if you somehow did not see it. But we extended this. Or I'm sort of extending after the show. I kind of, just happened to catch this and thought, wow, we were just sort of talking about this. And so anyway, added it to the run sheet here. So if you consider what I'm about to say as an extension of the discussion we had in the first part of the show today on Saturdays with Renee, it'll even add that much more. But the university's widely decried capitulation to the Trump administration's extortionist demands highlights, among other things, the deep red line running right down the middle of higher education. A now infamous March 13 letter from federal agencies threatened Columbia with $400 million in canceled grants unless it crushed its student activists, brought to heel the one department that inter alia focuses on Middle East studies, and took all disciplinary decision-making out of the hands of the faculty to be dispersed instead by presidential diktat. To this and more, Columbia unctuously acquiesced, startling the university's former presidents and many of its illustrious alumni. The proposed cuts represented a small portion of the interest earned annually on Columbia's $14.8 billion endowment, although they would not, of course, have been easy to absorb. A battery of Columbia University legal scholars offered up a waging counterattack, underscoring the many ways in which the $400 million would violate Title... What is this? What are these... Roman numerals. I just went blank on what they are, but whatever they are, that's what it is. Oh, man. Apart from the blow to academia. Oh, my goodness. That's wild. Oh, so 6. Right. 6 and 7. Title 6 and 7. Okay. I don't know what that was. I'm going. Anyway, apart from the blow to academic freedom, the Columbia affair illustrates a much larger trend, ostensibly to oversee the busy operations of the university so educators do not have to. Administrations have increasingly become overpaid impediments to faculty work. So this is where, for me, the article actually starts to get really interesting after the sort of summary of where things are with the attacks. They start to make the point and lead us to this to the specter of Said. And starting off with this fact here, which I think is a really, really, really good point. That, and in fact, what the article is ultimately saying, and they, I think, make the point explicitly a number of times, is that kind of, again, like what we were saying this morning on Saturdays with Renee, that what is happening now is an exacerbation of problems that have already long been in existence. And the idea that Harvard or Columbia or these institutions now being attacked, it's similar again to when Dr. Orisami Burton had talked about the liberal counterinsurgency and Trump's attack of DEI. But DEI is liberal counterinsurgency. So and as Jared Ware correctly check me on, that is itself a manifestation of neo-colonial rule. So the idea that Harvard and Columbia, we now want to rally around them, or to a certain extent are encouraged to want to rally around them in their fight against the Trump administration is part of the many contradictions here. So what they're saying here is that Columbia was already, like much of higher education, and I would argue it's magnified in many ways at HBCUs, where the administration is just increasingly there to get big paychecks and make the universities a functionary of the state, the military, and et cetera, and so forth. So ostensibly that these, as they say here, the administrators are there to oversee the busy operations of the university so that educators don't have to, but these administrations have gone beyond that basic mandate. And I think that is actually, by the way, a really good way of thinking about it. Administrators shouldn't be seen as they're there to lord over scholars and students and the management of teaching per se, but they're there for the business. And I don't mean that's a bad choice of word. They're there to just manage the operations of the university, to make sure that everything functions so that the true mission of education should take place. That's at least, but okay. But then as it says here, many of those now reborn as educational professionals, deans, provosts, college presidents, are yesterday's soybean futures analysts.
That's called my
Yeah.
know nothing about that. Now listen, that's called my boy.
Oh man. And I just noted that they had an anti-Semitism task force. But it is not really a betrayal when those committing the actions have no investment in the principles betrayed. Their whole mission, in fact, has been to explode Columbia's hard-won aura of gritty New York trendsetting, evident in its long line of antinomian originals. So, meaning the administrators are there to just by the soybean. What is the soybean future analysts have been looking to destroy this aura of a formerly working class, relatively speaking, wannabe Ivy to a giant Ivy competitive intellectual powerhouse that would produce critical thinkers like Edward Said and many others listed in just a moment,
they want to get rid of that. These populists and progressives were much more than star professors. They managed to turn the public conversation in enduring ways toward the rights of immigrants, women, the poor, and embattled points of view. Some questioned the hierarchies and irrationality of capitalism itself, among them John Dewey, Franz Boas, members of the Frankfurt School in exile, such as Paul Lazarsfeld, which is interesting because, again, Lazarsfeld becomes part of his work is used as part of the construction of this country's propagandistic approach to mass communications research. But anyway, for a short while, Theodore Adorno, Karl Polanyi, Margaret Mead, C. Wright Mills, and Emanuel Wallerstein. EdwardSaid, the most important Palestinian critic and scholar and one of the most influential left public intellectuals of the 20th century, also was one of those to be added to that list. Of course, should be added the absent presence behind each of the recent government demands on Colombia. That is EdwardSaid, the most prominent or important Palestinian critic and scholar. Said, writing to his sister in December of 1967, captured what a lot of Columbia faculty no doubt feel today. I now think that one might be better off if one is intelligent and has his wits about him, remaining in the Middle East. America is so utterly crazy now. And exactly those people who should be guiding its collective life, i.e. people with intellect in mind, are so totally alienated from its collective life that it's pretty horrible to watch the national life go down the drain. In May 1968, Herb Leibowitz, a friend of Said, wrote a letter saying that could easily be mistaken for an account of the brutalization of the encampment protests by New York City police in 2023. Students you've taught bloodied in the head or bumped and banged along the ground as they were thrown out of the buildings and into paddy wagons. Tactical police dressed like stormtroopers, their faces contorted in sadistic rage. But there have always been these two Columbias vying for control. The hot center of radical student revolt and the East Coast snobbery of those products of Ivy League feeders and finishing schools. Columbia, it turns out, has a long history of expelling students. Today, other universities are being attacked through Columbia, and not only because of the Israeli-Palestine crisis, its proximate cause. The real target is the university Said embodied, an idea more than a place, the model of the humanities as public conscience, the voice of a broad, non-specialized intelligence, without any particular expectation of profit, putting itself in danger in the name of truth alone. This is ultimately what lawyers, legislators, and think tank stalwarts of the pro-Israel team revile. Many remember Said's essay, Permission to Narrate, but only in the context of the current demand to put Columbia's Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies departments under receivership does its meaning sink in. Not satisfied with the top-down control over a department, the Trump administration has recently proposed that the entire university be placed under a consent decree, giving a federal judge authority to see that the government's ultimatums be made good. What is offensive to the current order is not simply protests against war crimes in Gaza and the West Bank, but any telling of the Palestinian story. Palestinians must not have a story, any story. They must simply not exist. Said has reemerged, we might say, as the bogey to be banished. He gave the critique of Zionism, especially its penetration into American foreign policy, media, and higher education, a dignity it was previously denied. Along with Noam Chomsky, he made intellectual intervention into politics professionally respectable, more likely for others to achieve. Much more than Chomsky, he gave a Palestinian position its gravitas. What has changed is that his lesson, once admired from afar for being maverick and lonely, has now taken hold in educational circles across the country, its force emanating from Columbia. Hence, the brand has to go even if it means killing Columbia too.
Said, for that reason, still haunts Columbia's halls and has become fused with its being. Signs, both explicit and implicit, mark his continued presence. We have the Edward Said Memorial Lecture Series, the Edward Said Chair housed at MISAS, the Edward Said Memorial Library, 2 sizable reading rooms side by side in Columbia's Butler Library, towering over the quad on which the students pitch their tents, whose walls are lined with 2,000 books from his personal collection. Said was at ease with them, that is, the VIPs, over lunch at the faculty club and loved being feted as a celebrity himself. Indeed, his own credentials were not that of an iconoclast, but that of a president of a modern language association, chair of the English Institute, an honoree of the Prince of Asturias Award, a strange radical showered with every honor that universities can bestow. In controversies at Columbia over programming, he was the mediator rather than the resentful incendiary on the margins. But if Said was, in many cases, a company man, this is the company that interested parties now want to eviscerate. Columbia's leadership once worried that Said might succumb to Harvard's long-term wooing and leave for Cambridge. They had, in fact, been eager to protect him from political as well as physical attacks, even installing bulletproof glass at his office windows. When his campus office was vandalized, the administration defended him and ignored surveillance inquiries from the FBI, refusing to sell him out when he was called a terrorist by the Journal Commentary. The provost at the time, Jonathan Cole, Said's friend, came to his defense after the now infamous photo of Said throwing a rock while visiting the Israeli-Lebanese border. Such a defense would now be unthinkable under the dispensation of Shafiq, Armstrong, or Shipman. To eradicate a disease, one at times risks killing the host. The brand that Said helped fashion, Columbia's trustees appear to be saying must be dismantled, packed away, forgotten. Just thought that was fascinating. Both Said's legacy, the contradiction of it being the brand that the university wants to get away from, the contradiction of him being a radical, critical thinker, but yet very seemingly close to the administration. That's fascinating. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever considered his relationship to the university. So that's interesting. I did, let's see. I did actually take a quick look at that essay they mentioned. That is Said's. Let me just pull this up here. Permission to narrate. I've always been a big fan of his work. Used it a lot in graduate school, where I, of course, became introduced to it. But it's interesting that, again, it's just an unfortunate, of course, reminder of how long this nonsense, this 75 years. But Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon, an international commission of 6 jurists headed by Sean McBride undertook a mission to investigate reported Israeli violations, concluding for the most part that it was ethnocide or genocide of the Palestinian people. And then the rest of the essay is more or less just a discussion of Israeli propaganda and the suppression of the Palestinian narrative. Israel Shahak, I hadn't seen that name in a long time, but an Israeli critic of Israel. I don't know to the extent he went far enough left, but I do remember him, occupying, pun intended, that rare, seemingly rare, or made to be rare Israeli academic critical of Zionism. But so yeah, it was just another reminder again of how long this has been going on in this struggle over narrative, and it seemed to fit well with Said's work around Orientalism and the media depiction of Muslims and Arabs. So, okay. All right. Moving right along. Again, welcome everybody. I will revisit the chat ASAP, but welcome everybody. Please do like, share, subscribe, support the platform however you would like to. And hope you're having a relatively good Saturday dusk. All right, let's so I shout out to Geechee and associates, comrades, the panel that I'm talking about. I think, wait, did I put this in? Anyway, I just did put a video out of slight disagreement with Professor Jessica Gordon Nemhard and something she said on a panel hosted by Geechee about cooperatives. And again, I don't know how willful it is, but there does seem to be some confusion. Someone hit me up on a clip from that I put up on Instagram, and someone from Cooperation Jackson again hit me up like the last time I said, and you know, it felt a little off, but I'm not condemning or being critical of cooperatives. I'm certainly not critical of Cooperation Jackson. And as I reminded them the last time, someone from that wonderful organization misheard me about what I'm saying here, I invited and had a discussion with Kali Akuno just to clarify. Again, I'm not taking shots at anybody who's operating in cooperatives. I'm not taking shots certainly at Cooperation Jackson. I'm not, in the same way, my buying power argument is not taking shots at people who open up businesses necessarily. I'm simply saying in that last video, and all I'm saying about Professor Nemhard's work and her argument is that I don't agree with using DuBois as central to an argument in defense of cooperatives while ignoring his later rejection of cooperatives and in favor of socialism. So it's and ultimately all I would be wanting to be added to the conversation is DuBois at one point thought cooperatives would work, gave it a shot. He explains later why it doesn't work, or he thought it wouldn't work. But we're going to give it a shot in the 21st century in the context we're in, as a survival program or as a mechanism to help each other out while we're developing new levels of political organization and et cetera and so forth, maybe even considering what Du Bois himself argued for, becoming more aggressive about advocating for socialism. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying would have to be added to the conversation. It's not saying don't do cooperatives. I'm certainly not critical of anybody engaged in cooperatives, and I'm definitely not critical of Cooperation Jackson. I'm simply critical of the approach just in terms of the scholarship and the history and the historical record. That's it. So, and by the way, I said this, I didn't say it most recently, but I have said that not in the same way, because I don't use Abram Harris as a centerpiece of my argument around buying power. But similarly, the extent to which I do refer to Abram Harris in my work, I do in his condemnation of buying power, it would be appropriate to note that he apparently later in life changed and became very pro-capitalist and so on and so forth, in which case I'll go on to disagree with him, and that would be why. His initial critique of black capitalism was correct. So that's all I would be saying in terms of a conversation about Du Bois and cooperatives. He at one point supported them, later did not support them. Here are his reasons why, and here are the reasons why I am either going to agree with him and adopt his politics or disagree with him and keep on doing something with cooperatives for the time being. All right. So, but I did I went, because in that last video and in several others, I've referred to this speech and in both in excerpts and in audio. I did just want to go back and read the whole thing. And there's a couple of other little gems in there. From 1960, Du Bois' Socialism in the American Negro. democracy has so disappeared in the United States that there are some subjects that cannot even be discussed, as he opens up. And does that not, that feels like we're back in that space where, as he says here, Senator McCarthy succeeded in making America afraid to discuss socialism or to recognize communism. I was criticized for being bitter, as seeking not simply political but social equality for Negroes, for favoring the teaching of Karl Marx, and for joining the Socialist Party. These accusations were true. And then he quickly recounts some of the history around there being a socialist push in this country before the First World War and through the Second World War. And then came the surge, as he says, towards socialism called the New Deal. Now, if I read him correctly here, he seemed to have I don't know if I even agree with him on this one, because it sounds to me like he was saying that Roosevelt's New Deal was a necessary step towards socialism, in the same way people at one point were arguing Obamacare was a necessary step towards universal health care. And I think in both cases, these were not steps toward, but blockages against. And as others have pointed out, Roosevelt's New Deal was more about saving capitalism and preventing socialism than making a step towards socialism. But nonetheless, as DuBois says here, with the death of Roosevelt came reaction. The United States not only stopped progress towards socialism, and I don't know that was, but ceased to discuss or study it, and came to regard the object of socialism and communism as a crime, especially the American Negro. I happen to think this is a good point, and one of the reasons why the Black Power movement, and a point we'll come back to later tonight, the Black Power movement became such a targeted threat, because it had adopted a militant form of socialist politics into a Black liberation context. So you put all that together, and absolutely not. And we're still suffering the effects of this in 2025, where, to the point I started off with just a moment ago, we are not talking about whether it's socialism or any other form of militant redistribution. We're not even talking about that anymore, or we're encouraged not to talk about that. And please, I don't mean in the specific circles in which many of us in these spaces move. I'm talking about more broadly. So that's another kind of reason, it is part of the reason why I am bothered when in this case DuBois is referenced without a discussion of the socialism, because here he is saying we don't even talk about it. We're not learning about it. And as he gets to in this speech, that's sort of the point, that without doing that, we don't realize that so many of these other things we try to do within a capitalist society are not going to work. Yeah. American Negroes, he says, right. This they thought would bring them. Oh, right. American Negroes were not socialists. They did not know that communism was doing or trying what communism was doing or trying to do, but they knew that Negro education must be better, that Negroes must have better opportunities to work and receive a wage that would let them enjoy a decent standard of life. Again, that sounds very similar to today. Many people in the Black community are not paying attention or not aware of what's happening in the broader socialist or BRICS or non-aligned world. They are still being forced to focus intently on better education and opportunities, including in the business community. They were victims of the disease and drifting into crime. I don't know how I feel about that. That I don't know. Sounds unnecessarily bougie, but whatever. But this is his point. But his point is that this is a derivative of the conditions being imposed. To remedy this, they sort of pattern their life after successful Americans, and that is exactly what is still happening now. We are being encouraged to do that. I got a perfect example to play later of a nightmare version of that, almost comedic, but nightmarish version of that. That if you're not like them, if you're not building like them, what are we talking about?
A class structure began to arise within the Negro group, which produced haves and have-nots and tended to encourage more successful Negroes to join the force of monopoly and exploitation and help victimize their own classes and any other lower classes that were possible. That's exactly what's going on to this day. To remedy this situation, thinking Negroes still regarded their first step toward emancipation as being political power. Message. Going through this again, I mean, moving ahead a little bit, this is again DuBois saying, his point being, long story short, until I realized socialism was the ultimate goal here, I tried to plan an organization among Negroes as consumers, which would furnish employment, help savings, and bring unity of action. But it was soon evident, as many of my fellow workers warned me from the beginning, that individual action could not bring consumers cooperation, that without power of the government, it would fail. And with government cooperation, it was socialism. In my mind, there is no doubt but that the world of the 21st century will be overwhelmingly communistic. Well, that would have been great. That center is not simply the right of Americans to spend their money. So he's talking, well, let me he's talking about the civil rights movement, the NAACP, the bus boycott, the experience in Montgomery, the extraordinary uprising of students all over the South, and the beginning of the North shows an awareness of our situation, which is most encouraging, but it still does not reach the center of the problem. Again, that sounds a lot like today where, whether it's whatever, or whatever, a lot of folks are not getting, so at the center, and that center is not simply the right of Americans to spend their money as they wish and according to law, but the chance for American Negroes to have money to spend because of employment by which they can make a decent wage. That is bars. And it's still relevant to this day. This is exactly the same thing. And that stop. We are so much encouraged to focus on the spending and how we spend and where we have the ability to spend, and not on having money to spend based on an employment and an equal pay. What then is the next step? It is for American Negroes in increasing numbers and more widely to insist upon the legal rights which are already theirs, and then to add to that increasingly a socialistic form of government and insistence upon the welfare state which denies the further carrying out of industry for the profit of those corporations which monopolize wealth and power. So my argument around stop arguing around buying power and consumption and spending habits and focus more on the fact that there's $27 trillion every year created in this country through GDP, and it just needs to be better redistributed. This is mine is just, again, a child of this argument. The stopping of a government of wealth for wealth and for wealth, and the returning of the stopping of a government of wealth for wealth, and the returning of governmental power to the individual voter with all the freedom of action that can be preserved along with an industry carefully organized for the good of the masses of people and not for the manufacture of millionaires. Does capitalism offer such a program? It does not. It offers war. Wow, is that still prescient? We have no peace movement in the United States that deserves the name. And then he starts talking about this Collier's magazine issue, which is really interesting. On October 27th, 1951, 8.5 years ago, Collier's magazine, and I went and looked it up again. It was a very popular, well-circulated elite magazine, a flamboyant pictorial with a circulation claimed to be 1.5 million, published a number in which the leaders of American science and literature made contributions. At the time when a few socialists in the United States dared to open their mouths and many were in jail, when economics and social science were being taught in institutions like this with the utmost caution, and when I was being handcuffed for advocating peace with the Soviet Union, this extraordinary magazine was on every newsstand and radio and television. It predicted and described in 130 pages of the aggressive war of the United States against the Soviet Union, and the editors and contributors said that this year, 1960, would see the utter destruction of communism the world over and the victorious American troops walking in the streets of Moscow. So that didn't happen either. And in fact, as I looked it up in 1957, 3 years before 1960, the Collier's magazine folded up. And as DuBois says himself here, the year 1960 has come and is a third gone. What has happened? Collier's magazine is dead. It wanted 1.5 million readers. Its wanted 1.5 million readers have ceased to subscribe because the reduced prices which they charge for Collier's and a dozen other flashy periodicals which are thrust down our throats are not needed by the publishers. Saved as bait to advertisers who pay millions to make you buy their goods. He's doing my buying power argument in 1960. Perhaps our most unforgivable deed today is our attitude towards China. Historically in America, chinks have always rated below wops and niggers. Negroes were lazy and jolly, and this infuriated the slave drivers, but Chinese coolies worked like dumb-driven cattle. But for the prisoners in our own overcrowded jails who rebel each day and cry in vain for justice and mercy, our only remedy is more jails. This shows the increase in our religion. This shows why we tax Americans into crime, poverty, and suicide, and spend 10 times more for war than for education, health, and Social Security. They have, however, no right to prevent the truth about socialism from being told. They have no right to prevent students from studying the remarkable philosophy of Karl Marx. And then as he points out, as while everybody's decrying communism and all of its intellectual constrictures and how it's going to limit the potential of humanity, they launch Sputnik and get up into space before the United States, which, by the way, has an eerie and unfortunate connection to the rise of African studies in this country. But especially American Negroes must know that this is what is going on in the world today and learn for themselves what this has to teach them in order that they may preserve their culture, get rid of their poverty, ignorance, and disease, and help America live up at least to a shadow of its vain boast as land of the free and home of the brave. By the way, Americans have 300 million invested in South Africa, more than they did 10 years ago. So again, I just think it's important that if Du Bois is going to be made the center or the foundation or a core component of an argument around cooperatives, that it actually ends up functioning in as a mechanism of the process he himself was describing in his lifetime as something that denies Black audiences a discussion of the world of socialism. And in this case specifically of critiques of cooperatives. So I just wanted to follow up with that and revisit that real quick. But again, I'm not denying the importance of cooperatives. I'm not saying don't engage in cooperatives. I'm not saying people who do cooperatives are the enemy. I'm not, none of these crazy things. I'm just simply saying what I've just said. I think that's now, where did I put this thing? Okay, so while I look for this next piece here, please everybody like, share, subscribe, do all of the things. Peace to the chat. I will you know what? I'm gonna have to come back to this Boondocks. I was saving it. Dang, I hate when this happens. Sometimes I'll be like thinking I'm really being organized, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, or I don't put things where I thought I put them. All right, moving right along, then I'll come back to that. My apologies on that. So I saw this. So recently, right? So recently, I raised some criticism of the way biraciality, multiraciality is discussed, historicized, politicized, and I offered my message from an Oreo cookie. And I'm not sure that folks of a certain age got that particular reference. Sometimes I don't want to be more explicit. Why should you? You should just, you know what I'm saying? But, so when I saw this video, I said, maybe. So I already put it in the show description, but let's just check out a clip of this from the channel Good Work about our boy AlexKarp working with Palantir.
In the United States, jumped by 54% last year. A lot of that momentum driven by Palantir's pivot from data surveillance in their...
And sorry, he's just now talking about the stock price increase, or the value increase in Palantir, the increase in value that has jumped recently for Palantir stock based on their move from military defense to AI.
In their early years to AI products today. Now, the honchos who originally created this sprawling Palantir beast are none other than Peter Thiel and this guy, who looks like if Taika Waititi got electrocuted. His name is AlexKarp. Though Thiel tends to stay in the shadows like the sassy little mystery minx he is, Karp is one of those modern tech CEOs who says a bunch of crazy shit to feverish crowds of employees and retail investors that he calls Palantirians, leading them like mother flippin' Caesar Augustus.
It's definitely been in this kind of meme stock Reddit retail army category for a while. The subreddit for Palantir traders is, I think it's about 100,000 people now. I mean, they refer to AlexKarp, the chief executive, as Daddy Karp. He's really responded to that by saying kind of increasingly I'm trying to find a polite way to say this, just increasingly kind of out there things in his interviews.
That's right, Tabby. It's always dangerous to start calling rich guys daddy, because you never know what they're going to feel emboldened to say next.
Me as a front man offending half of America.
I don't think in win-lose. I think in domination.
Almost nothing makes a human happier than taking the lines of cocaine away from these short sellers.
I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us.
And now, despite whatever thoughts you have on good old American fent pee, Karp is a tricky figure to pin down. Yes, he partnered with Peter Thiel, the notorious far-right libertarian who backed Trump's 2016 campaign and bankrolled J.D. Vance's political career to build a data surveillance company for hunting down terrorists, all stuff that might be easy to generalize as conservative. But then again, he backed Kamala Harris during the latest presidential election, he frequently donates to Democrats, he likes to go trail running, and loves Denver. All stuff that might be easy to generalize as lesbian. Everybody, I think we got a new type of guy on our hands.
Karp is someone who comes from a kind of left-wing background. Peter Thiel, who's the founder and really the person behind Palantir, is famous in the Valley for being a very outspoken conservative or a techno-libertarian. They have these really interesting, strange bedfellows in terms of leadership, but I think they have something in common with the old style Valley, of the Valley of the Cold War era, in that there's this understanding that there is a partnership that's necessary between private industry and the defense establishment in order to get the best tech in the hands of the U.S. government. And it's waxed and waned, but the business of war has always been.
Yeah, I mean, again, the link to that whole video is in the show description. It's pretty funny, and but for me, of course, aside from the probably inappropriate jokes and commentary around what AlexKarp does to my argument around the solidarity of the mixed. Probably more importantly is that this is sort of speaks to a point I was getting at earlier, a point we definitely got into in great detail today on Saturdays with Renee, that we need many more militant oppositional forms
of electoral political engagement. Peter Thiel sponsoring Trump and Vance, his right-hand man, supporting Kamala and the Democrats. I think that, as much as anything, says, if not everything, a lot. So, and he's messing up my argument on top of it. So just shame on dude all the way around. All right. Moving right along. This was a little bit of a heartbreaker. Just got sent this. Was this Eve? Salute to Eve. If not, Eve deserves many salutes. Anyway. As folks know, we've shown an affinity here and throughout Black liberation media over there for UncleNearest. So when I saw this, I said, FawnWeaver, of course, the head honcho, the boss over there, had this to say recently in this clip.
The stage recently, and you said there are certain things in this country we make about race when it is about money. It's not about our color, it's about our economy. The way we change the game is not DEI, it's owning the properties.
100%.
Yeah.
What we look at in so many instances is race. It's really money and power. A lot of the things that we think are race is economics. And we have to understand that we are a country that was built on capitalism. And the only way that you are going to advance in a country built on capitalism is not try to help its morality. That's not how we were built. And so we have to know how to operate based on how it was built, based on how the system was built. And it comes down to money and power. It always has.
So, first of all, she is correct that you're not going to fix capitalism with moral appeals, but you're also not going to fix it by attempting to own businesses. Again, the part of the accumulation of the wealth and power that sets many in the elite in this country apart from the rest, it starts, of course, with all the violence of settler colonialism and enslavement. So, again, the Black capitalist argument always skips all of that. They didn't just show up and open up a storefront and sell their lemonade at a better price, at a better quality than the neighbor. So this idea that you're going to, that Black people should just, get a piece of the pie, own, no. And power doesn't come from business. Business is a manifestation of power that has already been accumulated. But this also kind of speaks to something I'm going to come back to in a little bit as well. This idea that, this somewhat similar to what we were talking about a minute ago with EdwardSaid and narrative. That part of, now he was talking about the total erasure of Palestinians. DuBois was talking about the erasure of the narrative around socialism, and Black capitalism erases the nature, erases the history and the narrative around the accumulation of wealth and power, and then
all of it attempts to, well, in this latter case, attempts to rebrand power in a way that assures we won't ever have any. But that I think we'll be coming back to that point in a little bit. So, yeah. Anyway, all right. A couple more things here. My bad, man. Did I over? Yeah, my bad. We might. Okay. But a couple more things here. So, big salute to the sister who we talked about. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Who was talking about black buying power in Kenya. I got an email from someone who is again asking for or encouraging some discussion and even bringing in some discussion into a continental African conversation, which again is just beautiful. So I got this note, said, "Good evening, sir. I just wanted to link you this because I had quite a long discussion on this platform I'm about to show you, dedicated to Black British culture, which is with the hosts of the show that I thought I'd share. I mentioned you by name in the book, and I will be honest, I didn't do an exact job of confirming sources and remembering exactly what I wanted to say because there was a lot to process, but I felt I did a decent job as far as addressing the buying power myth and factoring in the British perspective," end quote. And you did. So thank you for sharing this. Thank you for doing that. And let me get to that clip here. Now they're talking about this. All right, so maybe I'll do it this way because they're talking about this in the context of oh wait, do I have that right here? Hold on. They're doing this text of Wallo from Gilly and Wallo fame. I don't know if any of you saw this, but he went off at some event about Black business. And it was a little bit similar to the Godfrey Black Amazon platform conversation. Salute to that crew and peace to you, Dante. Hope to hear from you, bro. But similar to what they were talking about there in the context of the reason Black businesses don't do well is because they don't offer quality service and good work. And so we'll start with, just in case that if you missed it, I'll start with that part of where this show, and they're linked in the platform, begin their coverage of, and it's the day after TNB platform. Link is in the show description, and their discussion of Wallo sparks a war. I'm not supporting bad Black businesses. All right. So let's see what Wallo had to say.
Business, Black business, you're just finessing.
All right, you know what? We're going to play the clip again, yeah? Because I think...
All that shit, don't nobody want to hear that shit. That's a hustle. Support me because I got a Black business. Is your restaurant clean? Is the food good? Do you got consistent cooks? Is the material of your shit good? Stop doing that. Oh, you support...
So anyway, that's the gist of it. And he goes off for a little while. That's basically what he's saying. He's doing a lot of cussing and yelling, and he's saying, this is how I bring it to you real. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I make money. I'm rich. And I'm not going to just support you if you're not doing good service. I'd rather go support whoever, right? So he's saying all of that, and then I'll play this clip here.
What did you say we could call you again?
It's Odai.
Odai. We will get used to it. Good morning, Odai.
Good morning, Odai.
That's all right. I just want to say, I think listening to this discussion here, I think this isn't an isolated thing. I think it's more reflective of the issues I think that people have run into in various ways in terms of talking about like Black business in general. And I think this comes back to, a lot of this comes back to the central idea that Black business and investment in Black business is the solution to our liberation. And I'm somebody, because I did share a video in the server regarding somebody about this book that I read, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. And I'm not against, in terms of, like supporting Black businesses and like, going there, because I think that's important and that's worthwhile. But I think we need to get into like really understanding the rhetoric and a lot of the basis behind this, because there's a lot of people who love to shout out Garvey and Malcolm saying they were pointing the way to this, but I don't think they really go into the larger ideas of why they thought that business was the way out. Especially considering, let's keep it a buck, Malcolm wasn't on that tip after he left the Nation of Islam.
That's facts.
He wasn't.
Talk to it.
Because he moved away from that after he left the nation, because he got frustrated with Elijah Muhammad and them, because it's like, we've got the resources and we got the manpower, why aren't we using it? And I think I'm going to keep it a buck as well to say that a lot of the ideas as far as how Black liberation can uplift the community, it's just trickle-down economics they're arguing for, which in other places has been argued about like, oh, it doesn't work for the Black community. But when it's coated in all this revolutionary rhetoric, suddenly it's all of a sudden progressive. And I know some people in the chat in here will say this, oh yeah, but look at, of course, look at the Asians, look at the Jews, look at X, Y, Z. We're not Asians, we're not Jews. We don't have the same sort of connections to the system at large the way they do, right? And that also, in terms of looking at them, it ignores the fact that they've got their own wealth disparity issues.
I mean,
right?
They may have their own wealth disparity issues, right? But aren't they perhaps affected less by?
So that's where I'm going to jump back in, and I'll again invite you to check out the rest of the discussion. It's like almost a 3-hour show for the whole thing. But first of all, big salute to all of that whole crew. Thanks to the brother for sending it to me, and thanks for that to them for having these discussions. I absolutely love that there's reference to my work in there. And I love that's just beautiful. The Pan-African reach, the connectivity is just mwah. However, not however. To my point, though, we see the same kinds of responses and the same kinds of arguments being made in those settings. And I get that's Black Britain and not the continent, but the African diaspora. But so many we saw this, so much of the same thing happens when we saw the sister talking about it a couple weeks ago. We see it here, but even in the other brother's response, when he says, well, first the point is made about we can't do what Asians and Jews do. And then my man says, but don't they have a different, and then he goes on to say they have their own class disparities, which shout out to Sudeep and Renee for when we got to get into that a little bit about the class distinctions in Asian communities. But the response to that was, but don't they have a different relationship to society than Black people, Africans? And that's the point. So the point shouldn't be that their relationship is different to the system or to society than Africans. So therefore that should explain away their or should diminish what we think of as the class disparities that they suffer. It should be used, the point should be used to say that that's why you can't expect Black or African people to be able to do what they do. And I hope I said that clearly. Because he was saying in the clip where I ended it, the host is saying, yeah, they may have some inequality that they suffer, but it's not as bad as what we suffer because they have a different relationship. So he's using it to distinguish between the poverty in Black or African communities and the poverty in Asian communities or Jewish communities. And it's not to say that there isn't a difference, but the point when he says that they have a better relationship or a relationship that Black or African people don't have the benefit of, that is that should be taken to explain why you can't say then do what they do. To the extent Asians and Jews have it better, it's because they do have a better relationship or a different relationship than Black people have to their colonial powers. And therefore, it should not be said to colonized Africans to do what Jews and Asians do. All right. But salute to them. I love that the conversations happen. I'm obviously honored to have reference to my work be brought up at all. And I am learning from the fact that, again, we're seeing the exact same arguments put back in response. All right. All right. Again, please, everybody, like, share, subscribe. Put in your comments. Put this in your socials. And let's move right along here. So, all right, the link is in the show description to this story. One label under Blackmail, the early intersections of Diddy and the Epstein network. There's a lot to go through in this, and I'm not going to do it justice. So I'm going to encourage everybody to definitely read this. It's part one of a forthcoming 3-part series. But there are a couple of points in here that I want to bring up that I don't think will likely get discussed in many other circles where this story is brought up at all. My overall summary point here, as I wrote in my note, is the article takes us away from political analysis to and toward sort of a more empty conspiracy theory. The overlap between WhitneyWebb's arguments and my own are there. We do, in fact, make similar arguments, but they're made differently and framed differently to encourage different responses. I think, so in other words, when there is discussion of how a music industry with all kinds of interconnected corporate and otherwise ties to the broader geopolitical universe, that manipulates the popular form of the content, there's a lot of overlap there. She and I make very similar arguments. There's a lot I agree with, but I think and I don't know how she'll proceed in the next, and I don't know enough about her to know where she is already politically, but my argument is, I think, despite what dear brother Stephen Ferguson has had to say, and we're still trying to work out if I'm waiting to hear back on scheduling his appearance. But despite his criticism, I think I make a very material political argument that looks to explain the particular oppressive conditions Black people are in, and that I use the mixtape and hip hop as a way of explaining those conditions, with ultimately the idea that with a particular political analysis and framing, Black people and others would be encouraged into certain forms of political activity in response. This article mirrors for me too much of of a more ambiguous, amorphous politics that allows people, and readers will be able to take this everywhere. If you have any form of critical thought about this society, if you want to focus on the Jews did it, this is definitely for you. If you want to focus on a more broader, the white folks did it, this is for you. If you want to focus on the mafia and the sex and the abuse and the freak offs, this article is for you. But if you want, or if you would hope that a reader would walk away from this with some sort of political clarity that the Diddy experience or story might help us expose, I don't think we get that. So that's just my overall, and then we can just sort of quickly. But the bottom line is that so in what she does here, she shows like there's a lot here, a lot of research here. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of circumstantial evidence, a lot of that looks like that is, but there's not really the smoking gun, pun intended. There's not the kinds of concrete connections made. And again, that's why I think that there's a lot left that, but essentially between the mafia, the corporate world, a little bit of the intelligence community, there's some CIA stuff in here, all of that has conspired to create conditions where Diddy, much like she says of Epstein, are not the power themselves. They are themselves manipulated by power, but kind of like Brett Ratner here, Andre Harrell, and Russell Simmons all end up becoming sort of pawns in a broader, not to justify their behavior, but they're not the dominant power force here. It should be no surprise upon closer examination of Sean Combs, like Epstein, he was operating on behalf of a larger network that he did not ultimately control. So that's sort of, so she goes back and forth in the article with Puffy's history, his sort of rise in the music industry around 1993 with the help of Andre Harrell. She goes into some of his childhood, where his father Melvin it looks to be assassinated as a potential informant, himself being involved in the mafia-connected drug trade in Harlem. He was found shot in the head. So again, there's a lot of this in there. There's some fascinating stuff. It's wild. Saying that Melvin Combs had actually been an informant. Then Puffy goes to this Catholic school, Mount St. Michael's Academy. And then there's all kinds of wild scandals, abuse, a whole bunch of stuff happens. A whole bunch of teachers and administrators get caught. There's speculation that one of the main known victims was a classmate of Puffy. So there's, so just from early on, they're just showing Puffy to be all caught up in this hypersexual, hyper-violent, hyper-abusive environment, so that by the time he ends up getting into the music industry, which is accurately noted here to be itself an extension of a criminal enterprise. I mean, it's the mafia that and I just saw a discussion with Fantano and what's his name? What's my guy's name? The other big music, the older white guy that I like his channel too. What's his name? Rick Beato. And they talk about how the music industry that was set up by was initially sort of taken over and evolved by a mafia that had been put out of business once liquor was made legal, and they needed new criminal ventures. So they got into, of course, drugs and sex work, but then also the music industry. And again, one of my favorite books on the history of that industry is called Hitmen, for a reason, because it's about people who make hit records and hits. So anyway, so they talk about the rise of Lear Cohen, how he pushed Rick Rubin out to get to be partners with Russell Simmons. They talk about Kim Porter and Andre Harrell's relationship and Puffy's relationship. Of course, they talk about the music industry, MCA, mob, they call it Mob Corporation of America, that peaked under the Reagan administration, who of course died during my wedding, and Les Wasserman. So there's a lot of fascinating characters. I've read about Wasserman and all these, like these very conservative ties to the state. And they talk about in this article how Reagan was himself, as we've talked about many times, himself used as an actor to suppress socialism and workers' rights, and then of course became the menace that he became for so many years. This video is also interesting, a short, reminder of the mob's relationship to MCA. Of course, the promotion of Zionism through Edgar Bronfman. I used to talk about all these cats. In my earlier work, I Mixed What I Like and elsewhere, a lot of presentations around this, the Bronfman's connection to the music industry. And again, my point was always that when you look at the broader interconnected web of politics, intelligence, the state, et cetera, what you end up with is, again, a very politicized need to manipulate the popular culture of oppressed community to aid in the to ease the process of their oppression, to not only extract money and profit, but to manipulate the cultural production and expression, to manipulate the public opinion, much like propaganda. So I don't have any problem with these kinds of conversations in a certain political context. I just wish. I was just thinking of, like, if I had assigned this, for instance, to my students, without this kind of conversation, I think, were they to actually read the whole thing, they would, again, you just kind of walk away with, wow, it's really messed up and conspiratorial. It's just a web of just abuse and violence and power. There's really not, I don't know, and then it could just easily become whatever. But they do talk about, the notorious COP, the Rap and Tell Pro, and Puffy going to these clubs in the red zone, where according to this video, it's just a lot of wild and very free behavior, shall we say, was taking place. And then you see all these other overlaps. This is Roy Cohn, who was, the Trump kingmaker. And if you see that new movie about Trump and see what Roy Cohn, if you get, however accurate that depiction is, and we all know what that might be like, but anyway, Roy Cohn here with the dude from Club 54, Steve Rubell. So it's Studio 54. It's again, and they're just painting this picture, like they're not really saying, and then Puffy did this or so-and-so did that. They're just saying, hey, he was just in these spaces with these kinds of people. There's a lot of wild sex and abuse. And Aaron Hall from Guy, who, is it true he still disappeared? He, once it became known that Aaron Hall was was showing up in some of these documents with Puffy, Aaron Hall dipped out. Thought that was interesting. But a lot of people, I mentioned the other day on the Remix Morning Show on Black Liberation Media, of course, Friday morning, I mentioned that Devontae Swing from Jodeci is mentioned in here, but then I also read recently that he was exonerated, but he was accused of in this story of watching. They get into, of course, Clive Davis, shown here signing Whitney Houston. But again, Clive coming out of these same kinds of spaces. And then here's the connection to the CIA through William Casey and his connection to Roy Cohn, and was, and to Les Wexner. And then this Tesla guy who ends up in Epstein's black book. So it's like there's all, but again, what exactly is being said here and why, it's not really been made clear. So maybe she'll lay it out in parts 2 and 3. But so far, it's and I mean, all of these dudes are accused of some wild stuff in here, some abuse, uh, really trifling and wild behavior. You got Brett Ratner being brought up in this as well, who was just recently back hanging out with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, seen here much earlier with Michael Jackson and Puffy. But then Ratner is shown here with Elon and Trump at this earlier this year. But just that he was friends with Puffy. They worked with Puffy. Puffy had a part in behind the scenes apparently in New Jack City. And that's how the Ratner connection comes in and the Hollywood stuff. I mean, so now this was something that I did want to talk about that I think is one of the kind of things that concern me a little bit about this, because now I don't know about a lot of the research that Webb cites in this story. She does talk about John Potash, who obviously I've interviewed a number of times, read his work and appreciate his work. So that's maybe one source that I'm familiar with. But a lot of the other sources, I didn't really vet the sources. I didn't really, I just read this actually a couple of times with a kind of wild fascination and concern. And this part, this has always kind of bothered me. She makes reference to this anonymous industry letter that claims in 1991 that the author witnessed a discussion about the intentional manipulation of rap music. And I've come to say that I've actually come to say that this letter that I've been hearing about for years, Wise Intelligent has talked about it. So many other people have talked about it. But I come to think of it more as an equivalent to the Willie Lynch letter. Not that it doesn't describe some accurate manipulation of African people, but it's not itself real. And it's cited here uncritically, and even references a scholarly source that supports the letter that I'm going to get to in just a minute, which leads me to a little bit of concern. This could be my tendency is to say I just think this is another case of inexperience with Black history, with hip hop history, with Black studies, and I hope it's just that. I hope it's not a broader sign of a sort of flawed approach in research. But whoops, I didn't mean to do that. But anyway, the letter here, excerpted here, says, quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everyone else, including the author, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by his first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we achieved in our industry, blah, blah, blah. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us the very respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which would become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions in the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these prisons. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies that received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they became publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. So longer story short, the goal is to manipulate the popular form of the art so that it promotes the kind of behavior that would encourage criminal activity and Black people, men mostly going to prison. Webb then cites this story here, a professor emerita of ethnomusicology, Portia Maltzby, who says that claims to have been sent an email saying in the early 1990s, a former graduate student, then keyboardist for Stevie Wonder, called me upset that some record labels were actively recruiting black men with criminal records to rap. He believed that they were encouraging criminal acts among his group. In addition, prominent rappers have claimed from the 1990s onward that the music industry is financially entangled with the private prison industry and encourages criminal behavior through hip hop due to those entanglements. All right. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but this is sort of what was bothering me about this. And I forgot where somewhere in the story she references this here. Nope, that's not it. She references this article here as support for, in fact, I should. So when she references Portia Maltzby, the citation, the reference, because I was curious about that, takes you to this article here from Alicia Lola Jones. The music industry funds private prisons. The journal American Music, winner of 2022, University of Illinois Press. And it's fascinating, but the music industry funds private prisons, analyzing hip hop urban legend. Professor Jones here uses African culture and tradition as a means of analyzing the veracity of this letter, this urban legend. Okay? I'm not mad at the method. I'm not even mad at her conclusions which are that because of African traditions, we should accept the oral and unsupported history of this urban legend. In other words, she's saying that it should be accepted more or less as accurate based on. On the one hand, I don't agree, by the way. I don't agree with that conclusion. I don't think that, I think very differently. I think that it should not be taken any differently than the Willie Lynch letter. It should be criticized, particularly by scholars, because it does not have, there is no proof, there is no evidence. And I don't like giving such value to African culture and oral traditions and storytelling and the power of the griot. I don't think that should be taken, that those traditions should be applied in this way, because fully formed and functioning African societies in which, and she uses the word griot. I was always encouraged not to, that was a French term. I was always a French derived term. I was always encouraged that we should say challah. But I don't, who knows? But the point is, the oral tradition in African societies in more or less fully formed African societal context may be one thing, but in this context, it becomes more of a game of telephone. It becomes more of a game of apocryphy, and it doesn't do us any service. Sort of to the point I'm making in my criticism of this web article, in helping us develop an analysis. By just saying that we should use African storytelling traditions to give veracity to this urban legend, it depoliticizes it, and again allows us to drift off into unsubstantiated conspiracy theory instead of a political analysis of the interlocking relationships that bind us in this colonial setting. So, yeah, I mean, essentially that's the argument of the article. It's not, yeah. So, I mean, and then, by the way, in her notes, she's citing, Billy Carson and 19 Keys and the Anunnaki stuff and Yvette Carnell. These are just not sources that I think. In other words, I think these are sources appropriate to the apocryphal nature of the claim of that letter. So I'm just not a fan of. So to me, when Webb cites that scholarship to support this urban legend, without there being any particular, Black studies or Africana studies or appreciation for maybe a way to interpret, in my case, to disagree with it, I think it again just supports the I think the tone of this so far, part one of the series, which is again it kind of, by the way, so that was the other thing I meant to show, that they talk about this whole connection of the music industry to the prison industry. But and I will add the link to this if folks ever want to follow up. I just wanted to give a shout out to this is now, wow, what is that? 14 years old? No, 9 years old. I'm being real bad with numbers tonight. Hip hop prisons and mass media, the evil triplets of corporate ownership. This is an interview I did with the forgot what new name he took, but the formerly known rapper Homeboy Sandman, and salute to him because he's an amazing MC. But he had written this article on the secret relationship between prison and the music industries, and a lot of those similar topics are covered that are brought up in Webb's article. That is, the companies like Wackenhut and Corrections Corporation of America, all having incestuous corporate relationships with the music industry. But again, in our discussion, that is mine with Homeboy Sandman, it's framed very differently, more along the lines of what I've been talking about here. Here, these same very real bits of history, hip hop, Black and otherwise, are, I think, I don't know if I'm not thrilled with the frame. I'm just, and similarly, I mean, again, it's not to there's a lot here, but there's an important piece missing, the political frame. That's all. At the same time, Wackenhut and the CIA connected figures were apparently helping repurpose Iran-Contra. So there's, so again, she brings up Gary Webb, the Dark Alliance, the import, Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, the importation of drugs to not suppress Black revolution, but to fund illegal activity. And that's where she brings in the work of Potash and starts talking a little bit about, but again, doesn't even bring his political frame, often, at least so far, often connected to the suppression of Black radical politics and the specific oppressive nature of society. For me, the colonialism, but and yeah. Of course, here comes, she mentions Vlad hosting a discussion of Rick Ross and all that, These music industry, organized crime intelligence, and federal enforcement connections are also hugely significant, as Death Row, in conjunction with Combs' Bad Boy Records, was one of the primary Trojan horses by which gangster rap was injected into the culture, often at the expense of more radical activist and outright revolutionary hip-hop acts. Right on. Give her credit for bringing that point up, making that point, and at least acknowledging it, even if it isn't sort of, a sustained focus. But, and also it's not, I think expanded upon as a point. Why would this be done? What is the value of revolutionary music in the culture? Or at least non-harmful music? so far it's just everybody's gross, corrupt, and violent and hostile, which is true, but it doesn't encourage that we get, and as she concludes here, ultimately Combs, like some other prominent entertainers, was servile to his music industry masters. He worked within a system those masters controlled and attempted to expand his own influence and power within that system, but at the end of the day, he was never in charge. So, but anyway, definitely, I'm gonna keep reading the series, and maybe even checking some of those links that she puts in there. I should say, by the way, I was a little bit critical here, but it's well written, and again, a fascinating read. I just would like to add a little bit of the political frame to it, and I'm really not thrilled with that, because this is sort of my point. I think I did it humbly. I think others have done it as well. You can demonstrate how these outcomes are constructed in terms of the manipulation of the popular form of the culture, whatever cultural expression, without leaning on something that has no basis, that has no support, that relies on one scholarly article that makes a compelling, but I think insufficient argument around why we should accept something with no proof as being real, because in African culture, urban legends point to real things all the time. We don't need that. You can demonstrate. She does talk a little bit about some of the mechanism. You can demonstrate through payola, ownership, interlocking boards, through statements, through other forms of anti-colonial media theory, analysis, and argumentation. You can do it without saying, "Hey, by the way, there was this thing that somebody said that." With other people that have in somewhere at some time, and so that's why I think it's more like the Willie Lynch letter. But okay, all right. I think I actually, this is a way to do this. I went much longer than I thought. So let's do this. Like, share, subscribe, and if you would like to, support the platform, do all those things, and if you would like to join me for any comments, questions, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, condemnation, please scan the QR code and jump up on the thing. Otherwise, recycle some comments, and maybe I will dig them back out and review. Otherwise, I do have a couple things. The link, so the link does automatically drop in the chat. Nice. And let me know if you got any thoughts about any of this. Jab is right, but again, where has all of the approved scholarly analysis gotten us? Not far enough. I'm with you on that. Not far enough. But I wouldn't say, listen, when you look at all of the radical movements that have made some sort of positive impact, they all leaned on some form of analysis produced somewhere by some groups. So whether whether it's the Black radical historians, whether it's Marx and that whole, I think but I'll take your point. Your point's taken is not far enough. Not far enough. And I'm assuming approved by the sort of radical consensus is what was meant there, but approved by JB. So I think, look, again, I concede the point. It's not far enough. I think everybody would, But I again think that Fanon and Marx and even I think the African-centered world, I think Marimba Ani and John Henrik Clarke, despite some other critics, have moved people in some very important directions. But okay. By the way, even if it hasn't gotten us anywhere, I still don't think that would be any good reason to support. Oh, what's up, Too Black? Yeah. I was not. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I just think, we don't need it though. We don't need it. There's so many ways to get there. I mean, now of course all the names are escaping me, but dang, I just blanked out. Your co-author, Rasul, right? The book you all were just talking about, his new book on hip hop that you were interviewing about. I've just completely blanked. My bad. This is what happens. But there, you don't have to rely on non-supportable arguments or claims to make the point. You know of her work beyond that? I'm not familiar. So, all right, look, if nobody's got something, I do have a couple more we can get to in the interim, so I can come back and check on that. I will say, by the way, I will say one more thing about this Webb article. I think that, I'll admit I was a little bit enjoying just there being something more said about it than just sort of a routine approach to the scandalousness. But I was, okay. Okay, interesting. I didn't know. Yeah. All right. Well, so I'll check back with you all in a minute. Let me. So this was sent. Let's check out RizzaIslam real quick. This was interesting.
Like that price up? Yeah. Can't nobody else get this. You need to watch an old video called How to Sell to the Negro. They did a video instructing stores on how to sell to the Negro. They said, make him feel like he's exclusive. Make him happy about it.
Just real quick, I think he's saying they. So I don't know what the whole conversation was like. I've only seen this clip. He keeps saying they in reference to selling the Negro. It's not they, it's John H. Johnson. And this is one flaw I thought immediately of in the framing of this. And in some ways, because I think Rizza and I might not be on the same page as it relates to black capitalism. So he kind of leaves out the black capitalist, the black bourgeoisie, the black business role in this. The selling of the secret to selling the Negro was produced by John H. Johnson of Ebony magazine fame, specifically so he could attract white corporate ad revenue for his media empire. So I think immediately I'm not sure Rizza has the frame right on this, but all right, hold on.
About it, make him feel like he can't afford it. Put it behind the glass. Say no, don't even worry about looking over there. This is something that's around your budget. You mean I can't afford that? What? Give me that. It's in your whole check. Sell your house for a jacket. How to Sell to the Negro. You watch that, you're gonna be like, they really did this. Yes.
That's also, he's also not. I think he's not. That's not. The point of the selling of the Negro is not to it's not saying you trick them by hiding stuff you want them to buy behind expensive glass because that'll trick them into spending the money to buy it. That's not what the video is doing. The video is saying because black people want to be in the middle class, you can and should market your goods to them. They can afford it. They do earn enough. That's where you get the buying power myth, taking off yet again, because it says in there they have a buying power of, I forgot what it was at the time, 15 million or whatever. So they pay their bills on time. They're responsible financially. So that's the point of the video. It's not saying he's got the frame. I don't know if I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if he's seen the whole thing.
Here's what sales psychologists have to say about selling to the Negro.
The secret of selling to the Negro is expressed in one word. That word is recognition. Now, there's nothing unusual about that. People want to be recognized. They need recognition. That's basic in all of us. But perhaps because he's had so little of it, the Negro needs even more. He needs to feel important and appreciated. This need is a very real and important one. It shows up even in many of the Negro's shopping habits. Anyone who sells or wants to sell to the Negro customer should know about some of these habits. 3 habits in particular play a big part in every sales transaction. To begin with, most Negroes buy by brand. They ask for products by name. They're quick to turn down off-brands. Buying by brand, that's the first important Negro buying habit. Now for the second. The Negro buys good quality merchandise. Symbols of quality and prestige are very important to the Negro customer. This woman, for example, is buying fine crystalware. But she is also buying the admiration and approval of her friends and relatives. Listen to her thoughts.
My, isn't it beautiful? I can hardly wait to show it to Sally and Joan.
It's a well-known fact that many Negro customers are influenced by the opinions of others. What their friends may think of a certain item often decides whether or not the sale is made. So remember, the Negro buys quality merchandise. That's the second important point. And here's the third thing to remember when selling to a Negro customer. When he specifically asks for one thing, don't try to sell him something else. Don't try to switch him at the point of sale. If you do, he'll probably react something like this.
Doesn't he think I've got the money to pay for it?
The Negro resents being offered a substitute. He wants to be sold on quality, not price. The Negro buys by brand, he buys quality, and he doesn't like to be switched at point of sale. These are the keys to selling the Negro customer.
According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group.
They were very serious. Why? Because it works. Don't get mad at me. Get mad at yourself for buying. And we are the top consumers.
See, he's saying it, but again, he's missing the point. It's not being done to trick Black people into spending more money. It's being done, the point of the video is to show that Black people have the money that these businesses can expect to collect if they advertise with Black media. They'll get these Black consumers. And then he's trying to teach, that is John H. Johnson is trying to teach this white corporate world how to treat the Black consumer once they show up to buy the product. I think Islam has sort of missed the point here in focusing on this idea that Black people are being tricked, and it's the point is John H. Johnson is saying Black people now have the money, want to buy name brands. That is the name brands that you can advertise in my newspapers and my magazines and whatever. And they can afford it and they'll buy it. So don't treat them like second-class citizens who can't afford it. They have the money and they want to do it. There's no trick needed. John H. Johnson is offering up the Black community as an aspirational middle class post World War II non-threat, non-civil rights, non-Black power community.
They gonna hike that price up? Yeah.
So why do we spend so much? We spend so much because this is a 70% consumer-based economy. Everybody spends so much. If we don't spend so much, the economy crashes, and the Black people who have jobs in this economy lose those jobs. So again, the issue is pending revolution. Don't blame people for consuming. Fight for more of the wealth that is produced by the consumption. All right. Don, welcome back.
The deal. What is the deal? Uhuru.
Uhuru.
So, should I not get the new MacBook or not?
I'm not judging the purchase. What I would be saying is we should all be fighting for more of the share of the wealth produced by that purchase. The workers who produce that MacBook should have more of a salary, should have more time off, shouldn't be working not so much in the sweatshops in China or whatever else. That's how it should be. The workers should all be paid, the quality of the product should be higher, and we should all have free health care and education and housing, quality housing as a result. So yeah, purchase on, and then let's all get a bigger piece of the wealth that produces.
Mm-hmm. Now I like to hit the open box as it is per se. Lee Boggs, you are right. I don't miss a chance to call in. I like my pretty little face and I like my pretty little voice. So I hops on the camera and I likes my my host or whatever, right? This is Dr. Jared Ball, author of Black Buying, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, Morgan University professor, right? And honestly, you know, I'm thankful that the good Reverend Doctor, you know, offers up his time to the community, right? Arming us with independent social, political, and cultural analyses and assessments. This has been my TED Talk.
All right. Thank you very much.
Everybody can't smoke that shit.
Yes.
On that note though, so the verdict, I'm trying to follow, right? I'm trying to do what y'all say and stuff like that, and I'm trying to come up with a verdict for like the Target boycott and stuff like that, right? And so-called DEI. So we know that there was no profit made from DEI, right? Nothing really, in fact, changed. So from my perspective, the only so-called changes or reforms that I'm seeing are going by like education and stuff like that, and it's just cut back. Social services and education, of course, right? So having said that, you know, what is the verdict? Because for me, we're just trying to figure out Black community control of education in response to, you know, the cutback reformism.
What is the verdict in terms of this administration's attacks on education? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What, like, how are you? And social services, right? Because we know social security. Because like literally, my grandmother is really worried about, like, you know, not receiving her income and stuff like that. So that's your new intro. Dang.
Yeah. Look, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. The verdict, it's my inclination is to say what I said earlier, which is that what Trump is doing is making worse an already bad problem. So I would like whatever our reaction is to be more, again, radical or militant than would just get us back to wherever we were, which I don't even know if that's possible anymore. Right. So I think I don't know. I mean, I think we need all of those broad-based movements that put pressure on this society, that created Black studies, that created the counterinsurgent response of giving Black studies, DEI, and all that kind of stuff. That there should be, and I think that, but it should go beyond that to say that there should be policy put in place that permanently redistributes and protects some sort of better public school system. I'm somewhat moved by some of the more radical arguments around independent schools, particularly for Black communities.
Yeah, what's your feelings on that?
I don't know. On the
love them.
On the one hand, I'm very moved by the idea. On the other hand, I feel like there's a part of that is similar to my argument around buying power, that the focus on getting a little bit of money, relatively speaking, for a few independent schools is going to take Black people out of what should be their rightful place in a broader fight for in one case the labor movement, and in this case for public education for everybody.
I see. We concede no democratic space. However, I do think, like, the way that I define homeschooling is a popular alternative that many African families via income simply do not have access to, right? So I think, like, literally, if we just did something like homeschooling network, because, like, there is a militarization of schools happening.
That's true.
Especially,
I mean,
excuse me, especially here in Southern California. LAUSD just spent a good $2 to $12 billion on police this year alone. You know what I'm saying? So
hey, look, I went to pick up my daughters a couple weeks ago, and then the Navy had this fly ass setup in the parking lot with these dope new Black uniforms and video game consoles, and they had like a whole mini amusement park set up to attract people into the military. And admittedly, I did walk by and I saw a couple kids waiting to play in one of the games, and I said to them, that looks pretty fly, right? They were like, yeah, they couldn't wait to play. And I said, but they don't tell you the part about getting sent to war and cleaning people's toilets and doing their dishes. And then they just sort of looked at me for a second. I was like, and I just kept it moving. But so I get that. But my problem though is that the political force that would be required to support and develop and buttress a thriving and substantive homeschooling or independent schooling network is the same kind of force that could be used to create a public school system that would be devoid of military involvement and the like, and so on and so forth. That I think, to the extent that we're not able to leave, that to make this country that we're forced to stay in as good as possible. And then that same force, that same political force, could theoretically then also recreate the public school curriculum. I mean, he got a lot of flack for this from a variety of circles, but and deserves more for some other things probably as well. But I am not unaware of the efforts by Molefi Asante at one point to get Afrocentricity into the public school system of Philadelphia. And I think in part because there's a recognition that not everybody is going to have access to an independent school or a good homeschooling network. And then rather than just abandoning those Africans who get caught up in the public school system altogether, there should be some effort. So maybe it's a yes and,
yeah.
Or, in addition to that, we fight
That's
for
exactly
some,
what I was gonna
but
ask.
Yeah.
Both of them, and then because I would simply pose it as a those youth that are victimized by the system and get pushed out right, of the of the public school system, we're there for that. So I'm not thinking, and because people are in the chat saying tuition and stuff like that. Like, no, this would simply be, I'm thinking specifically on the intervention mode, if that makes sense, right? Them kids that's getting kicked out, them kids that's keep getting suspended for whatsoever reason, are hopefully our instructors will be have some specialization in special education, because that's a problem for working class households, especially like here in Buena Park. There's actually, I think it's it's 3 middle schools, and only 2 of them have special needs program, for all of the possible just people in the entire area. And that's pretty wild to me. So these cutbacks are happening.
This is exactly what I'm worried about. What Sayla says here: New York City charter schools have only enriched a tiny handful of capitalist black and brown individuals, while continuing the myths of neoliberal capitalism and supremacist ideology worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I'm just like, listen, we're doing that. We're having those victories in the democratic space that exists now, right? And we have a mechanism that avoids the school to pipeline that intervenes in the school to prison pipeline. So I'm not saying nothing, like, me personally. Again, this is my opinion. This is my cacophony, all them C words that Jab be using.
So I appreciate that. And speaking of another C word, Chitty Matcha is waiting. So if you good, can we
Yeah.
I'll let her join us.
Heck yeah. All right, Uhuru.
All right,
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you very much.
Students, youth, and parents, I need y'all to get with me. Join the youth and student working group. Reinforcements are on the way. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you very much. Always good to see you. Peace, peace, peace. Chitty Matcha, welcome.
Hey.
Thank you very much.
Hey, how's it going?
As good as could be expected. How you doing?
All right. I wanted to jump in on that schooling conversation.
Yeah.
Schooling, whatever we come up with under this system is just not gonna work. Because even homeschool networks, even because when I think about like what happened in New Orleans post Katrina, where basically the entirety of the public school system was fired, like all the teachers. We're talking about like teachers, their lifelong dream was to be a teacher. Like they went to college so they could be a teacher. They had teaching credentials. But like firing them, number one, because the teachers union for Orleans Parish was the largest workers union in the state. And so they got rid of an entire workers union, but then replaced with like young, fresh out of college. And while like working in especially one of these larger networks that's nationwide, that I think like 2018, like a couple of schools got caught changing grades. And what was significant about the class of 2018, as a side note, is that's the first graduating class that had 0 experience with Orleans Parish public school system. So for those kids to be failing, they couldn't blame it. For a long time, as the charter schools were struggling, they were blaming it on Orleans Parish public school system. And okay, well, what you gonna do now? You're graduating people with a worse skill set than what the public school system was graduating them with. But they really like, especially like Teach for America, they love young and fresh out of college, because while they may be really smart, really dedicated, really wanting to like help kids, they don't have enough life experience to question some of the things that are being implemented and to be able to push back. So there's nobody that can push back. And then they kind of run the gap like 2 years, like they do their 2 years. If they survive that long and they're out. And so we have, like, when I think about New Orleans, we no longer have, we're producing a teacher staff, because like a lot of training used to go into teachers. Like you had to shadow an experienced teacher in the classroom before you even got your own classroom. Like all of that is gone. Because the last school I worked at, you know, the guy, because they were getting desperate for, I guess, hiring for teachers. And he's like, okay, well, we can train anybody. You know anybody that works at a bar or something? Like we can just get them in here. We got a good like benefits plan, pay. And I'm just like, think about what that sounds like, getting people from working in a bar. And that's not to say you won't find talent there, but that's what you're talking about to build up a teaching force is insane. But I think like we've kind of lost a generation, or at least me going by the experience here of a teaching staff that has, or people that are going into the teaching pipeline that have the skill set to be able to do things like, I don't know, like even homeschooling, even pushing back against certain things. And then for me, it's also not just about like teaching an Afrocentric curriculum, because when I first started working with schools, I thought I was gonna, you know, great, I'm in here with students, I'm gonna like get some radical content in there, or at least what was radical for me at the time, which was still like far left of like people I was around. And I saw very quickly that, you know, well, no, they don't have the skill set. So if you're trying to read and it takes you an hour to read 2 pages of a history book, even that whitewash shit, but then you can't tell me what you read after that hour of reading those 2 pages, then what can we do with that? And so, yeah, and there was just like a whole bunch of things, like even with the charter school experience, like where the cessation of grammar instruction, like grammar used to be a separate whole class, and they stopped doing that over the course of time. And so, you know, like now, while there's a literacy crisis that has entered public discourse, there was an interesting documentary, if anybody's ever seen it, it's called From First to Worst. And it was about California's schools, where, because they used to be ranked like 8th in the nation, and they were then ranked like 48th, like along with Mississippi and Louisiana, which is like a really huge drop. But that documentary used to be available online. There was like a whole like kind of like study guide with it. And it's almost like it's been scrubbed from the internet. I did find it on YouTube where somebody broke it up into 4 sections. So if you can find it, it's worth a watch.
Is this it?
But I haven't watched it. So
Learning Matters, First to Worst.
From First to
Is this
Worst.
not the same thing? Yeah.
That may
California
be
is-
it. How long? Because it should be about
This is 50.
something long. It should be
Yeah,
about
it's
an hour long.
50. It's just short of an hour.
See, that doesn't look like it though. That looks like what I found was maybe that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Scroll a little bit into it, you see, like the line, just so I can see like somewhere
That's it,
far
right?
into it if it goes. Because yeah, I haven't been able to. If that is it, yeah, if that is it, watch that, because one of the things that's in there, it's talking about like the cessation of grammar instruction, and how, because basically I guess a school board's job, it's the governance structure that's the problem. The school board's job is to adhere to state guidelines. So if the state implements something that is to the detriment of a student population, a school board can't really push back on that, otherwise they lose funding. And so there was like one that does look like it. So that's actually worth a watch, because in there they talk about like this one principal, or in this one district, and she refused to like stop teaching grammar, right? Because she's like, it's a skill that has to be taught. Like this is going to be detrimental. But she was also in an area where there was a bit more, the parents had a bit more money. They were in support of this, but then they lost state funding in order for her to do that. But then everybody can't do something like that. So there's a whole lot of things that they stopped teaching, and that whole school, it's like the whole language approach to learning came out of like UC Berkeley, California, Bay Area Writers Project. But that's something that got implemented over the course of like decades. So it's like a slow roll, because if something you learned in school and and you see that your children aren't learning it, you would notice. But if it takes a generation or two, then you might not notice it. Because I remember I would come back home and like tell people, I'm like, yo, they don't teach grammar in the public school system. They don't teach timetables in the public school system. And they're like, oh, that's ridiculous. And I remember my mother was like, had a walking partner that school district. And she's like, oh yeah, she says, they're not doing this out in California. And the lady looks at her and she's like, I got news for you. We're not doing it here anymore. And then even when working at the charter school, they gave this paper out and this training like, oh, how you don't need to teach grammar to teach language. And I'm like, okay, the kids can't read, they can't write. And then you're sitting here telling me that you don't need grammar. And so like my boss that was like half my age, and he's like, oh, well, you had grammar, that's not something you need. And I'm like, well, it's obvious in your writing that you didn't have grammar instruction as a separate class. And I said, I'm not meaning that as an insult, but I mean, yeah, there's something that's of a detriment when you stop teaching basic skills. So, you know, to get around to we want to teach something that's culturally affirming, like, yo, they can't even read the text or have the analytical skills because they've stopped teaching the things that would be required for them to digest and process the information. So I just don't see how any of this is successful under the system that we have. I mean, that doesn't mean we stop going for it, but I think people are really underestimating how much basic skill has been over time, just slowly and incrementally stopped. So yeah, that was long.
No, that's
Sorry,
good. Thank you for that. I appreciate
it.
And if folks refresh, the link to that documentary is in the show description. If folks want to follow up, but no, I mean, you know, right on. I mean, you're right. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
So yo, I appreciate that. Definitely. Thank you very much. Charter bosses ain't loyal, so why should the teachers be? Yeah. So
it's a mess. It's a mess.
Nah.
But yeah, that was all I wanted to come on and say something about that while y'all were.
No, thank you for that.
Just to,
and definitely thank you for your constant social media support of this and Black Liberation Media. Appreciate you. Yeah.
No problem.
All right, you too. Take it easy. Shout out to Chitty Bacha. And all right, folks. So what I'm gonna do is apologize. I'm gonna come back maybe I don't know, soon and chop it up about the Black Power scorecard. But I'm gonna have to wrap it up here for the evening. Literally, baby girl number one is pulling up into the house, and we're gonna get some family time. So peace, everybody. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. Thank you very, very much for joining me this evening. Please do whatever you can to support the channel, support Black Liberation Media and all of the other satellite principled comrades in these spaces. This has been a lot of fun, much more to come. Got to wrap it up, B. Thank you all very much. This has been great. Again, peace only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and I'll catch you next time right here at...
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm. Kindness, kinship. Love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.